Such, bearing the date of November 1845, is the paper which you have transmitted to me, with a request that I would answer it. This I will now proceed to do. Before I descend to particulars, I may begin with the general remark that the paper before me, as I am fully convinced by the perusal of it, could never have been written by any honest man who was a sincere inquirer after truth, and who, in pursuance of that object, had carefully studied the subject on both sides. Now, as I acquit your youthful relative of all intentional dishonesty, if the paper be really his production, it must have been written by him purely on a superficial and one-sided survey of the question, and in consequence of his having implicitly swallowed all that his Tractarian or Popish instructors have thought fit to tell him. I have known cases of this kind, and I believe them to be in no wise uncommon. At all events, any other supposition and any other estimate of his conduct involves a charge of conscious and deliberate dishonesty, which I should be most sorry to bring against him. But whoever may have indicted the paper, your nephew has plainly never read more than one side of the question, and and from long and repeated experience, I am constrained to say that where the interests of their church are concerned, the priesthood of Rome are so entirely the reverse of being scrupulous in regard to truth that I have long made it a rule never to receive any startling assertion of theirs without previously testing it. And certainly wherever their assertion was of an extraordinary nature, I have, upon examination, invariably found them to be falsifying. Throughout my book, I wrote, Difficulties of Romanism, I have constantly, in the way of historical testimony, examined both sides of the question. Has your nephew read that work? And if not, will he refuse to read it? Should such be the case, it is vain to argue with him, for a shallow and yet determined one-side reader puts himself out of the pale of all legitimate discussion. And I repeat it, had your nephew honestly studied the subject, instead of building upon the unscrupulous assertions of the Romish priesthood, he never could either have written the paper himself, or have been at all influenced by it, if received from another person. It is a mingled tissue of gratuitous assumptions and daring misrepresentations, or rather, indeed, absolute falsehoods. Let's begin. 1. The real foundation upon which the entire paper rests is the claim of infallibility on the part of the Church of Rome. If this claim be valid, the discussion is obviously at an end. Your nephew, therefore, as preparatory to his other statements, ought assuredly not alone to have boldly asserted the infallibility of the Church of Rome, but to have substantiated his assertion by some distinct and tangible evidence. Now, he brings no proof whatever, either from Scripture or from history, that the Church of Rome is infallible. He does nothing more than loosely intimate that the Church is infallible through the Spirit of truth. Now, even if this unproved assertion were admitted for the sake of argument, it would not follow that the Church of Rome was infallible, any more than the several churches of Greece and Antioch and Jerusalem and Alexandria and Armenia. But this is the usual sophism of Romish writers. They assume that the Church and the Church of Rome are synonymous terms. And then, as if this mere assumption could not be doubted, they boldly argue from it as a point altogether incontrovertible.